Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining the webinar. The topic for today's webinar is Introduction to Implementation of ReactJS, which will be conducted by Mr. Kailash K. Yogeshwar sir. My name is Akshaya Hegde, a student of Viva School of MCA. I would like to introduce our faculty coordinator, Mr. Nitesh Kumar, student coordinators Rajeshri Deshmukh, Harshada Kamble, Divyakant Shevale, and Shloka Patil. This webinar is conducted under the management of late Shri Vishnu Vaman Thakur Charitable Trust. I welcome you all to the live webinar. Now, I would like to introduce our guest speaker for today's webinar, Mr. Kailash K. Yogeshwar sir. He has 5 plus years of experience in Node.js, React.js, MongoDB, Docker, CI/CD, and system design. Coordinating with team of 5 people, he has created 4 microservices which are robust and scalable to million transactions. He has created many tools and systems for scaling the existing system to serve millions of requests. He is an active member of GitHub community, creating open source tools and libraries which are production ready to be used in large systems. He is a Kubernetes enthusiast and has created a system which is helpful to automate the developer task for building and deploying our code. Now, I request Sir to take over and start the sessions. If anyone has any queries or doubts during the session, they can put their questions in the live chat. Thank you.
Thank you, Akshaya, for brief introduction. Hi, I hope all you can hear me. Uh, just put in a message if you are not able to hear me.
Yes, sir, you are audible to us.
Okay, okay, fine. So, what Akshaya had said about me, like I'm working with Software AG and was part of Build.io for more than 5 years. So, I am a pass out from Viva MCA and working with various technologies and have worked on React, Node, Angular as well, and have adopted the latest technologies like Kubernetes, Docker, which will be really helpful if you have some knowledge before joining your professional career. So, so let's start. And so today's session is going to be on React.js. So basic understanding of React.js. So I'll take you through the basic terminology that we use in React, and we'll have some practical session so that we can get a clear view about the theoretical uh, aspects of React and to implement it using the React.js library. So I'll share my presentation slides and we'll go through it. If you have any questions, you can post a comment and then we'll try to clarify your doubts and can show an example also using React.js. Okay, so let's start. I'll share my screen. Yeah, so basic understanding before taking on React. Why was React.js being developed by Facebook? So they were initially the UI thread of a web page or web application used to be created using many multiple web pages. Like even if you have a project and when you need to create a pages, you need to write the redundant code from here to there. Like if there's a login page, there's a sign up page, you need to create a separate files for that. And over the course of the application life cycle, there was some issues that were encountered when your application becomes large. It was not only developer friendly, but it was very difficult to maintain that code. And there were patterns that were observed, like we were repeating the code here and there. Like there was a email text input that you had used in your login screen, which was again used on the sign up page. The password field also was again. So we had to write the code again and again, as well as the JavaScript logic for writing the input data. So to overcome those problems, the Facebook decided to create a library called ReactJS. Hello, yeah, you're able to hear me, right?
Yes, sir.
Hello, yeah,
Yes, sir, you are audible now.
okay. So, so this was the main reason React.js was being developed by Facebook. Uh, so, so let's go through what are the terms that are being used in React. Okay. So what is React.js? So there's often a misconception about React.js, whether it's a, framework or a library. So to be honest, React.js is not at all a framework. It's a library which can be used with any of the frameworks. So for framework, if you can consider frameworks like AngularJS, Vue.js, then there's a Ember.js, a lot of other frameworks. So React.js is just a utility library that you can integrate into your existing framework like Angular for improving the performance or developing the reusable components. Okay, so React.js is a library for creating a user interface from simple to complex. It was been built by Facebook Income and made open source in May 29, 2013. So React is a declarative and efficient and flexible JavaScript library for building user interfaces. So what React uses under the hood is normal JavaScript. So it is used for mainly for creating single page applications. So there are no more multiple HTML files. Like I had said earlier, like if you want to create a two page, you need to create a login HTML as well as the register HTML. So using React.js, you can remove those problems of redundant code as well as writing the business logic again and again. So what React refers to it is a declarative, efficient, and flexible JavaScript library. It lets you compose complex UIs from small and isolated pieces of code called component. So component is a small piece of UI code. So like on the screen, we can say the main screen that is visible for you guys where the presentation is open can be a component. So the component has a different attributes, like you have a button to leave the session, to stop camera, as well as the mute and share screen button. So we can view this screen as a component in React.js. So if you want to use the same component anywhere on the page, you can use the same logic as well as the same component. So React, all the things that are being created in React, basically the are called components. So components are the basic units of a React.js. So like I said that React is a library and not a framework. So this is the one of the most unclear subjects of React. So React was never created to be a framework. It was created with single responsibility principle in mind, that is create reusable UI components. So there's a basic differentiation. What is a library and framework? So a library is a programming can be explained as a collection of code. So libraries are nothing but they are a piece of code which are written to perform a single operations. Like there's a library to create the square root of a number. So that's a library, and that's not a framework. Framework is a collection of libraries which is much more bigger than the library from aspects, and provides a whole lot of APIs for creating a framework like UI or in the backend. So we can write with JavaScript much simpler by using jQuery. Like if you are using a jQuery library, it is much simpler to fetch an element and do some animations on it. Or we can import the written jQuery features to our project. Okay. So that's the basic difference between library and framework. So that's a basic introduction about what is a framework. Package of is a complete package of code with its own functionalities and libraries. So React is building is for building user interface, and how you program the rest of your project is up to you. So it can be a single page React.js application, or if it's a bigger application, you can divide or organize your project into multiple components, which are easily maintainable and testable. So far, any questions? So we need to be interactive. So I would like to have some couple of questions from you guys as well.
Certain now, no questions are there in the comment chat box.
Okay, let me know if I am going too fast, so I can adjust my speed also.
No, sir, it's all good.
Okay, fine. So let's move ahead. Um, so these are the people, short list of companies that are using React.js for creating amazing products. So the at topmost is your Facebook, and Facebook on Instagram also, Netflix, PayPal, and the last in the list is my company, that is Software AG. So we are using React for creating a very complex UIs, and it's and to my knowledge and to my experience, it's really scalable and easy to maintain. Okay, Ketan is having a query. Yes, Ketan. Okay, okay. So let's continue. Um, let's move on to the next slide. Okay, this is very interesting thing. Before taking on to React um, Virtual DOM. So as you might be aware,
Uh,
yeah,
Sir, there is a query now.
okay, okay. So Ketan's question is how it's React.js efficient and flexible. Yes, React.js is quite efficient. Why it's efficient? I'll be explaining this slide. Flexible enough is yes, it's a flexible enough. There's no dependency on any other framework where you can use React.js. So if your existing application is created using Angular, Ember.js or Knockout.js, which are the frameworks for creating UI components, so you can integrate a React.js library. So some part of your page can be created using React without affecting the existing UI. So it will not affect your existing application, or you need to change your existing business logic. But you can focus on creating, like there's a live comment I can see on the screen. There's a live comment print on the right side. So if we focus to create that live comments window in React, we can easily create it even though the whole application is created using React.js. Efficient React.js is quite efficient, I can say, because the way it works is the way it works and the algorithm that uses to render the UI, it's a top-notch thing, and we'll discuss that why it's an efficient thing in the upcoming slide. I hope I have answered Ketan's query well.
Yes, sir, there
Any?
are no other queries, so you can proceed.
Okay. Okay. So at the root of React.js is like how there are a lot of questions like why is efficient, why it's faster than Angular, why it's faster than Ember.js or Knockout or Vue.js. So at the heart of React.js is a terminology which called as virtual DOM. So as you might be aware, what is a DOM, right? So it's a document object model. It's a tree-like structure of your whole HTML file, and React.js works by creating the virtual DOM of your whole HTML application. So what React.js does is create a clone of your HTML tree, and whenever there's an update that needs to be rendered to your UI, it compares the virtual DOM with the actual DOM. So if it finds using an algorithm which was created by Facebook, so if it finds there's any difference in siblings that are children's or tags that are not in an actual DOM, it tries to render only those elements in your web page. So so it's an efficient because it's not rendering your whole page or refreshing your whole pages. So refreshing your whole page and rendering is a quite a memory intensive task, as your web page might be consuming a lot of resources from internet, like you might be using your css file over the cdn, then there might be network call, and there's a latency involved in that. So react.js overcomes those problems by just rendering what has been changed. So that's an efficient. Uh, it is not visible unless React.js is used for creating a large products, like there's a stock market application that can be created using React.js, and there's a very frequent update on the website as the stock prices for thousands of commodities change per second. So refreshing the whole page per second is not a very good idea. Very good idea, yes. So React.js overcome that problem without refreshing page. It just patches the diff in the virtual DOM and an actual DOM. So so we save a lot of resources, and when creating a large application, we need to think about the small tweaks in your application and managing your memory so that so that your application performance is not degraded. So what is a virtual DOM? Virtual DOM is nothing but an in-memory JavaScript tree. So question might be, what is a JavaScript tree? So you might be aware, like to create a variable and then create a variable as an object. It's quite easy in JavaScript. So virtual DOM is nothing but a JavaScript tree of React elements, which are basically your HTML elements that is used for efficient rendering. Okay, and that are rendered on your screen using a diffing algorithm which is created by Facebook. So React maintains the virtual DOM tree like structure of your web page before any updates are being applied to your web page. So if there are any updates, like there's a stock which has increase in its value, so we need to show it on the screen and update it. What React will do is whenever there's a change, it will compare and see that the what element needs to be updated, and only that element will be updated on your web page rather than refreshing your whole page. So it saves a lot of memory as well as network resources, and gradually improves your application performance. So moving on further, so so this is what a virtual DOM looks like in practice. So what happens behind the scenes is like this. So the above image is your real DOM, which has 5 nodes, and then there's a change in your model, that is basically a database entry has been created. Like you can say, like, there are initially 5 users, and then one new user is been added. So we need to show that new user as well on the UI. So suppose we are showing that user in a unordered list, so you need to add one more list to your unordered list. So there's a change, so that change first is applied on your virtual DOM, and then whenever the React needs to render it, it compares with an actual DOM, like what's the difference between the real DOM and the virtual DOM, and only that patch is been applied. Like you can see in the image, like there's an orange box, which is a difference between the real DOM and the virtual DOM. So only that part of a web page is rendered on the screen rather than refreshing your whole screen. So Ketan, that's how React.js is efficient and flexible, as I had mentioned earlier. Like you can integrate it using in any of the framework like Angular or Vue.js. So before moving on to React terms, terminologies, that is you. Any other question?
No, sir. There are no any questions yet.
Oh, okay. So how you finding React? Like, is it going bouncer, or like getting some knowledge? Okay, you can put in your queries in the comment box, and I'll try to answer them. So let's move to React terms. So I can I can say, like, React is not written in a simple HTML or simple JavaScript, but it's a combination of all the three languages, I can say. So it includes CSS also, it includes your HTML tags also, as well as the JavaScript code for writing the business logic. Okay, so starting with the first terms that is used in React is the compilers. Okay, so what are compilers basically? Just a minute, I'll have more. Okay, so compilers are nothing but utility programs that are basically written for React.js, and they are used for converting your code into a much simpler and browser efficient, so that it can work on every browser. So React provides a way to write your code in the latest syntax, which is not yet supported by every browser. So compiler is the program that helps to convert that code into a browser compatible version, so that it can work on any browser. Like most of the things don't work on Internet Explorer. So compilers like Babel helps to convert your code, which is written in the uh, latest syntax, to into a browser specific syntax. The second one is your bundlers. So bundlers are nothing but a program to package your all the components into a piece of modules. So if there are hundreds of component files that you have created, so bundlers help them to package into a one single package with very few files that are been optimized for your browsers. So there's a lot of less network cycles for fetching every component file rather than using few of the component files. So as you might be aware, like there are package managers. So we need to use some libraries for which are specifically created for performing operation. Like there's a library for creating a prime number, highest prime number. So we need to use those libraries rather than writing our own code. So we need a package managers as well. So there are two package managers for React. So one is your npm and the second one is your yarn. So npm is always tied up with your node.js. So npm package managers will only work for the node packages, and yarn will also be working for npm modules. The fourth component is your JSX. So JSX is a syntax used by ReactJS for creating UI elements, and JSX uses a camel case property naming convention for HTML element. For example, there's a property for every element in HTML called tab index, which is all basically all the attributes for HTML elements are like you can say smaller case. But in React it is a naming convention to follow, which is always a camel case. So even if you're creating a element, so it should follow the camel case format for creating a valid element. So that is a syntactical sugar that JSX provides for creating a component in React.js, which will take a look later on when we create a sample application. Moving on, so these are the application terms. Those were the React terms, and these are the application terms. So when you start creating a React.js application, so these are the components that you will get to hear more when you will start working in a company which has a React.js product. So elements are nothing but the React elements what you want to see on a screen. So it can be a header, your h1 tag, and the h1 tag can be saved in any of the variable. So you can declare a variable and save the HTML tag in it. If you do such, if you do a declaration like that in a normal JavaScript file and try to run it in your browser, it will give you an error for the syntax that you have used. So such syntax are only understood by your JSX compiler as well as the Babel compiler. So it's a way of writing it in a JSX type syntax, and the Babel like compilers are created for understanding a JSX syntax and converting into an equivalent JS syntax. So it will be, so when you convert the below line in normal JavaScript, so it will be normally a document dot create element and h1, and then we need to call the inner HTML function and pass it the custom header h1. So that's how the Babel transpiles it into a browser specific code. Okay, so next we move on. Okay, so component is a basic entity in every React.js application. So I can say a component, like if there's a to-do list application, and for a to-do list you need to have a button to create a to-do. So once you add a to-do task, you need to show it on your web page also. Okay, so there will be a list which you have to create, for that you have to create a structure for that, what you will be showing in a to do. So there's a task title as well as the priority of a task, and many things other than that. So component is nothing but a small unit of a UI it can be an input box, which can be an email or password, or it can be any element on your web page that can be created using React. So it can be a toggle button or slider or anything that you can think of. So every element in an HTML can be created a customized component using React.js. So React components are small reusable pieces of code that returns a React element to be rendered on the page. So like I explained, those are the small components, and those are written in a separate component files so that it can be reused in anywhere on the page, whichever is required. Like I said, you can create an email component, and which can be reused in on your sign up page as well. So you don't need to write the HTML uh, again and again, as well as the logic for deciding whether the user that has entered the value, which is a valid email or not. So so it not only saves our time, but makes your application more maintainable and testable. So it will be also a good practice, not just to write a code, but there are a lot of other frameworks where which you can use to test your component whether it's behaving properly. So testing is nothing but if there's a component called an email component, and you need to check whether it behaves properly or not. So you can enter a valid input, and it should give you the result like it is a valid email, and on an inserting a invalid value, it should return an error message with that email is an invalid. So that's basically how UI components as well as the backend components are tested. So unit testing is a must for every developer. It not only helps you to test your code, but as well as find the bugs pre-hand before going or before pushing your code to the production environment. So big companies like to incorporate the testing frameworks and will not allow you to push your code unless all the test cases are being passed. So this is the practice even we follow at Software AG, and will encourage you also to not only just focus on programming, but also use the testing frameworks. There are a lot of testing frameworks for, there are separate dedicated frameworks for UI testing and separate dedicated frameworks for React component testing. Okay, so in the example below, we have created a welcome component, which is a small component which will print the hello message, and whatever name we have provided to that component as a property, it will print out the name of the person. Okay, so it's basically nothing but a small function which accepts the props are nothing but the properties that a component will receive, and the final target element that we want to return is your h1 tag with a message hello, and whatever name that you have entered in your input box that will be showed on your screen. So this is the one way to declare a component using a function. So this is also called a stateless component, because we are just taking in input, we are not changing anything, and we are just reading the value and displaying it on the screen. There's another way for creating a component, that is a class based component. So classes are nothing, it's similar to Java classes. So the same previous component can be written like this also. So this is a bit more readable and easy to write the code, as well as the person who comes after you have left the company is easily able to view the code, as that's a stateful component, and that can be easy for him to develop and test the code. So we just declare a welcome, and which is inherited from the component class that is provided by React, and whenever you declare a class-based components, is mandatory to provide a render function. Render function does nothing but it returns the element that is needed to be displayed on the screen. Okay, props. So now we have understood that the basic thing, basic unit in React.js is your component. So everything in React is a component. It can be a large component or it can be a small component like an input box. So every component needs some data to work on, or to write a logic on. Like if there's a component called square root, you need to take the input from the user, which is a number. Okay, so that can be said as a props for a component. So props are nothing but input to a React component. So they are the data that is passed down from parent component to a child component. Okay, so remember that props are read only, and you cannot change the value of a props and expect that it will be visible on your UI. So if a component is receiving a prop called number, and which had a value of 10, and then you are trying to change the value to 42, like in the showed in an example. So if you are expecting that it will be changed on your screen, so it won't, because props are read only and React will ignore the changed value. So props.children. So there's a additional properties on proper props that is called props.children, that is available for every element, which is a component that is used to traverse the children component. So previously we had created a welcome component and passed the hello world text to the component, which is served as a prop to a welcome component. So on the left hand side, we have used the welcome component in another component, which is your app component, and we have provided the hello world text to that component. On the right hand side, we have actually written the welcome component, and we are accessing the text using this dot props dot children. So this dot props dot children will contain nothing but the text hello world. So this is how, this is just a text, but it can be a lot of complex things, like it can be unordered list, and if you want to traverse down your list, so you can create a loop on the data and create a list by using this dot props dot children. So this is all about props. Okay, moving on. State. So this is the second most important component, in second most important aspect of React.js. So first is your props, and the second is your state. So basically you will be working on these two things only if you're working for a large company. So state is nothing, like like I said, React is a library for creating a interactive UI components. So whenever there's a change in model, like there are models in Angular. So whenever there's a change in a model, so model in React is basically a state. Okay, so whenever there is a change in state, React will update the component on UI. So whenever there's a requirement for a component to change its behavior, like if there's a checkbox, and we need to keep a track if the checkbox is checked or not. So we can create a checkbox component and create a state property for checkbox, whether it has been checked or not, so that any other component that's relying on it can use the state from the checkbox component. So a component needs a state when some data is associated with it changes over time. So for example, the checkbox component might need is checked in its state, and a newsfeed component might want to keep track of fetch posts in its state. So state is nothing but a database for your React application. So it's not a same database like MySQL or, JDBC, which we have it in a backend, but it's a in-memory database on your browser for your whole React application. So that data is inserted initially before your web page is rendered. So your React application basically fetches all the default data that is required for creating the initial web page UI, and reuses that data and make changes to that data whenever any operations or interactions are performed on your web page. So state is a database for your React application where you'll store a data that will be used by your different components. So state can be passed from one component to another component, but it can be only be passed using props. So there's a parent component which has its state. So let's have a parent component as application, which has a state variable called counter. So and there's a counter component which shows a counter result. So counter component will receive the props from the parent component. So state cannot be passed as in state to another component, but state can only be passed as a props to another component. So basically React, so it can be drawn to a conclusion that uh, React is a unidirectional flow of data. So data flows from parent to child, child to another child, and goes on like that until the final child. So so if there's a component which needs to share the same state, so we need to uplift that state to nearest ancestor. Okay. So the most important difference between state and props is that props are passed from a parent component, but state is managed by the component itself. A component cannot change its prop, but it can change its state. Okay, so state is mutable, and I can say props are never mutable. State can be mutable because it's a database, and we need to update the database quite frequent. Okay, so for each particular piece of changing data, there should be just one component that owns it in its state. So every component should have its own state, and that is completely managed by itself. So don't try to synchronize states for two different components. Like I said earlier, if there are two components which need to share a state, so don't try to share the state with two different components, and instead lift it up to the closest shared ancestor. Okay, and pass it down as props to both of them. So this is a state and props. So I will create a demo to explain what is a uh, so far what we have done. So I'll switch my screen. I'll try to share my screen so I can Okay, so I'll try to share my screen. Uh, okay, let me know if you are able to hear and font is visible. Else, I'll increase the font size. You able to hear, right? Able to see my screen?
So, sir, can you just increase the font size?
Yeah, yeah, I'm doing that. Is that enough?
Sir, little much zoom the screen. No?
Okay,
Sir, little bit zoom the screen.
okay, I'll open the code and okay, now it's visible, right?
Sir, not yet visible. So just increase the font size or the zoom the screen. Yes, sir, now it is visible. It was visible last.
Okay, okay, fine.
Okay,
So,
sir. Fine.
so now, like, it's visible. We'll
Yes,
try
yes.
to create a component, whatever I have. So we'll not be needing this. Okay, so I'll explain from starting. Okay, so we need to write our code in ES6 syntax. So this is an ES6 syntax. Okay, and as you can see on the right side, it's already giving me an error that app component is not defined. Okay, so let's try to create a counter application, and we'll be having a text box which will be printing out the counter, and there will be a two buttons. So one is your increment and second one is your decrement. So before creating a React application, you need to think it in a component uh, design way. So like I said, there will be a component, counter component, which will be having two buttons and one text box that will be used for showing the counter value. Okay, so let's start to create a counter component. Okay, so very basic thing is we need to use the uh, component class and we have to extend that. Okay, so as I had said that every component that's need to be interactive should create its own state variables. So we'll create a state with, so we'll create a state variable called counter. Okay, and we'll assign it initial value as 0. Okay, we'll change over here. Okay, and as you might be aware, we'll be having a render function. Okay, so we'll be having a container, then we'll be having buttons, increment, and we'll be having second button. Okay, so you can see it on the right side, the UI at the same time. It's visible on the right side as well. Okay, so I'll try to change this so it's a bit more. Okay, and finally we missed out the parent tag. Okay, so now you can see there are two buttons. Okay, so there are two buttons, and we'll be having one text box. Okay, and this will be, I can say I'll try to insert okay, and let's try. So I'm using another component and trying to add refer that component in my parent component. So we need to create another component also. So we can just create a component like this. So we'll be just returning a p tag and props dot counter. Okay, and we'll just close the p tag. Okay, so simple enough. Uh, we need to move this up over here. Okay, and we'll be adding two functions. Just had a typo. Okay, so now uh, we need to add two functions for incrementing your counter value. So we'll be having a two function and another function. Okay, so what increment will do is it will just update the counter variable. Okay, and what decrement will do is similar, but it will decrement the value of counter variable. That's it. So we have these two functions, and now we already have two buttons. Okay, before configuring the buttons, so let's try to first configure the buttons. So as I had said, in JSX everything is camel case, so you need to write the on click attribute in camel case, so you cannot write and expect to work it, but you need to write like this. So we can refer increment. Okay, and or so we have configured our component. Now let's try to pass the state. So as I said, this is our state variable, counter variable, and this is a parent component. Okay, so it has its own state because it needs to update the UI, and it is responsible for maintaining its state. Okay, so it's passing the state variable to message component as an prop. So how to pass the state variable as a props to a component is like, you need to pass uh, counter just like a normal HTML attribute, and this dot state dot count. Okay, so let's go through. Uh, okay, so it will be using the props dot counter. Okay, so as you can see on my right hand side, it's already showing me the 0. Okay, which is an initial value for that. So if I try to click on increment, it will increment, and if I try to decrement it, it will decrement. So so at the root of React, what it is doing is just changing this element. Rather than refreshing the whole page, it's just changing the value of this element and replacing this element from DOM. Okay, that is how it is doing a differentiation between a virtual DOM and your actual DOM. So actual DOM is right now containing 22 as a value. So when I click increment, the state is updated, and React get trigger, and it find out that there's a updating state, and it needs to compare the UI. Okay, if there's no change in the state, your component will not be refreshed, it will still be similar. Okay, so this is how component is created, uh, a small component. So I would like you all to go through this code, uh, small, and create a sample application. The name of this site is StackBlitz. So it's already configured for ReactJS project, so you don't have to worry about that. You just have to come and do the coding and see the results on the right side of your screen. So this is how a ReactJS application works. Of course, there are some syntax which are not been familiar, like dot bind, which is a very old method provided by JavaScript. you can read about it on Mozilla documentation, and a very handy function, and you'll often come across React project which is using the bind method. Okay, so this is your sample counter application that we have created. Okay, and this is the main advantage of a React is you need to create only a single page application, so there will only be one index.html file. Okay, this is your only HTML code that will be always be there in your application. Rest all the code will be dynamically changed using your ReactJS component. So you need to mount the component to, like we are mounting over here. So we are mounting counter component on your index.jl index.html file, and later on also we can create a complex structure. Also we can have a structure to create a multiple components and refer those components in this file. Like I said, we could have create a message component in another file and could have referred over here, like, and we could have referred over here. So that's how you will be managing and organizing your React.js project. Obviously, you cannot write your whole application code into one single file. So this is a basic React application that you'll be uh, relying on, and should be good for you to understand the concepts of React.js. Uh, we can create an another application. Okay, so so as you might be saying that I have used a set state to update a state. So whenever the set state is called, your UI is triggered, and then the updation is performed on your UI. Similarly, now the very important question is, like, this is a very short and small application, and we are just creating a small single variable in your local database, that is your state, a counter variable, and reusing that variable in your application. Now what happens when there are large projects, like what we have at Software AG and what Facebook has? So those are very large projects. So how you organize those projects? So how you organize those projects and how you organize that state is very important thing. So there are libraries that are helpful and that works with React.js for maintaining your state. So every now and then you cannot call set state and expect in return that component will update on your UI. So that is not a good practice. What we have written is okay for a small single page application, but it is not an efficient way for a large scale applications. So there are a lot of tools like Redux for maintaining your state. So Redux is nothing but a library for maintaining your state. It provides the functions so that you can easily use components and subscribe to particular events for that a component is interested to listen. So if there's a component called increment component which is only interested if there's a change in a counter value, so you can create those subscription using Redux.js library. Okay, so so now the question comes is how API calls are integrated in React.js. So that's a very good question actually. So API has its own API endpoints and React has its own routing endpoints. So React can be configured to create a routes on your browser rather than asking for those endpoint from your server. So there's a library. I'll try to share my screen, another screen. Okay. So this is a basic project that is React is. So you can see on my right hand side of your screen. I'll make it bigger so you'll be able to get. So as you can see how the React, this is a basic project that is React is. Hello. Okay. So Rajeshri has a question. What is a counter component? Okay, Ketan has a question. Okay, counter component. I'll go back to a screen I had shared. Okay, okay, Ketan. Counter. This is basically a component that we have created a custom component. We can call it a counter component. So counter component is basically the two buttons as well as the number that is being displayed. That is your counter component. Okay, and basically we have created a separate component for showing your number, that is a message component. So it can be configurable to show. We can change this as a this dot stage dot message to make it a generic component rather than making it a counter specific component. So this can be used anywhere. Let's say if you have created a message component with showing a message in a different background color, so you can take in a props from, and like you can pass in the props as color. So you can pass it a color. So you'll be changing the background of that component. Okay, so you can pass in the props, as many props as you want. Okay, like this. Okay, so this is how states and props are passed on to from one component to another. So message component has its parent component as a counter component, and it has its state variables which are passed on to the message component as a props. Okay.
Sir, there is a question regarding same of between prop and state. Can I display it?
Yeah. What? Okay. Okay, Ramu. So basic difference between state and props is props are nothing like you can see in my screen. So this is a counter component, and as you might be aware, like clicking on increment, you need to update something, right? So if I had declared this as a okay props dot counter equals to 0, and then if I had updated these props, it would not reflect on the UI. Okay, so props are nothing but read-only variables which are used by your component, and these are the components. I can say these are the stateless component which don't change your state variables, and as well as the props. So they just read up props and display it on the screen. They are not aware of any changes that have been made to the props. So whenever change is made to the state variables, it is passed on to the child components. So whenever state is updated, like in increment function, we are incrementing the counter state variable. So that is passed on to the message component with updated value, and message component takes in and displays the updated value on your screen. So that's the difference between state and props.
Sir, we will take the question after the session will over by your end at the end of the session. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
There's some another question, Rajesh sir. Does React.js components can be easily importable from other DOMs while doing complex tasks, or we need to mention each and every component in that file? No, we don't. Basically, we don't need to mention each and every component in that file. So there can be hundreds or thousands of components that you have created. You can just refer the component that you want on your web application. Like uh, we can we can create a separate component file for message component. Okay, and import that file in your counter application, as well as any other application which wants to display a message on the screen. Should we take one another question? There's question from Bhavik, I guess. How to test any props for any given value? Okay, so we can test the props in a component itself. Like if you want to take a decision whether to show a green or a yellow. Okay, if the value of a props is a 0 or 1, if 0 is there, we need to show red color, and if there's a value greater than 0, we need to show value. So you can decide on the basis of value. Yes, yes, basis of value that is provided to it, what how component should be behave. So so we'll take on the question. I think I have done from my side the slides thing. We'll take on the questions after 12. Hello, hello.
Yes, sir. Is there an
Okay,
issue?
no, no, there's no issue. So let's try to create another application. Is it okay now to create another demo?
Yes, sir. You can proceed further.
Okay, okay. So okay, so we'll be creating. I'll be
Hello, sir. Sir, your mic is off, I think so.
Yeah. Now
So,
it's right.
yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay. So we'll create a React.js application. Okay. Where we'll be having 9 box, and we'll be displaying a number in that box. Okay. So we'll just remove any unwanted file first. This is the file, basic file that we'll be needing. So we don't need this font. Okay. So let's try to create a application. So I'll be creating a folder. So this is my main application component. Okay. I'll just display. So first we'll try to create a components, uh, new file, air.js. Okay. We'll define a square. For now, we'll not be needing any uh, state variables. Okay, so we'll be creating input box.
Sir, there is a request. Can you please increase the font size little bit?
Okay, okay, I'll increase the fonts.
Okay.
Is that okay now?
Yes, sir. Now it's visible. Yes, yes. Thank you.
Okay, I'll just so I'll be referring this box component. Okay. Okay, we have created a square component. The next component is your box, and don't forget to export it. We'll create a box component. We'll copy those imports and we'll create we'll define a constructor. We'll have a render function, and then we can write equals to, let's try this. Then for temporary, we'll try to comment this and see how are we getting the props. Okay, so I am passing these dot props dot numbers from here to the box component, and we are printing over here all the props numbers that we are getting. Okay, let's try to create a state variable. Then we need to import our box component. Okay, and we need to refer over here, and we need to component props. There's an error. Prop is not okay. Fine. We'll check on it. We will pass the numbers. State dot numbers. Okay. So we have created our main component. We have defined two state variables. We have created an array of numbers. Okay, and we are passing on the number state variable as a props to box component. Okay, so you can see on the right hand side of the screen. Okay, we are getting an array with a number. So if you try to console log it and see what are the props that we are getting is like on the screen. So there's a list of numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, now using that we can this is a box, and so using same syntax, this syntax we can uh, create a loop for iterating through the array of numbers, and then we can do like this. So we'll create a component list, and we'll Okay, so this is how you can create a list and and call it as a list. So there's an error. We'll check what's the. Okay, so we need to change this to props props dot. Okay, so in this way we can create a list. Okay, we can render these components over here. Uh, let's see one more thing. Yeah. So any questions? This is a demo, a short demo where we can create multiple component files and use it over here.
Uh, so can we have the session, sir? Hello.
Yeah, yeah. Till then, we can take on queries or collect
What?
queries from.
Okay.
Yes, Ketan. Yes.
Sir, please unmute yourself.
Yes. So yes, till now we can say props are immutable as you had seen in the screen. Like we are just I'll reshare my screen again. So as you can see that we are not changing the props, but we are just reading the values from it and creating another component. Okay.
So we have one more question.
Yes. The color property you provided in the message component should be in the style prop. Yes. So that's the inline style that I had supplied. Okay, you can always create flexibility as per your convenience. So I had just given a short demo how you can use a color to change the background color of your component depending on the props value. So obviously you can use a class which is a better rather than using a color code. So you can create a CSS class for yellow color, orange color, and depending on the props you can assign a class name for that.
Uh, okay, sir, we are done with the questions. Akshay, can you please unmute yourself?
Thank you, sir. Thank you, everyone. Session 1 is completed. Session 2 will start at 1:30 after the break. So I request all to join us again at 1:30. Thank you.